blood pressure. We all tend to suffer from it at some time or another, but especially people who are my age. Now, most people think it's because we've eaten too much, not exercised enough, or done other things wrong with our lifestyle that we haven't done right. I'm here to tell you now, rubbish! Absolute load of cobblers. The thing that puts old people's blood pressure up is basically the world. For example, when I was a teenager, my grandfather used to hear of some new scheme put out usually by a politician or somebody else like that who thinks they know better than we do. And his immediate response to it would be, "Ah, rubbish, throw it out, no good." And I used to think to myself, that's a bit harsh. He hasn't heard the reasons behind it or anything like that. But now I'm as old as he is, and I've been around long enough to have heard all the excuses and stories and crap basically before. Simple example is, take a large organisation that some politician's interfering with. It's a large organisation. They come out and say, it's too big and cumbersome, it's inefficient. We'll break it up into smaller bits which will be better for the local communities and all the rest of it. So, great cost, great turmoil, many jobs lost, it's all broken up into little bits and pieces. A decade or so later, along comes another politician or somebody who thinks they know better than we do. And he'll say, all these small units, they're so inefficient, they're not providing an adequate service. We'll make it all one big super efficient unit. And a decade later, you guessed what happens again. Hence, you've heard it all before and you recognise it for what it is when you hear the idea, crap. The ideal British citizen. That's somebody who is born without any complications, therefore it's minimum cost to the government, and who goes through university, of course, paying their lovely tuition fee, and then goes through all of their working life fit and healthy, so it's no cost to the government, and they're paying them loads of lovely taxes. And then on the day that they retire, they drop dead, because then they don't have to pay you any pension or anything like that. Ideal British citizen. And for all of you kiddies out there who are starting off your wonderful working careers, here's a thought for the future. You'll be required, according to the latest think tank, to work 24/7 shifts. Because of the cost of living, you'll probably have to hold down 2 jobs. The government will love that, 2 lots of tax. And you'll be working till you're at least 79. And the good news there is that the government will require companies to provide suitable parking spaces for your Zimmer frames. Computers. Now there's a nice subject. People my age will remember when computers were just coming out in the 60s and 70s. And what our good friends, the politicians and technicians and know-alls of the day said about that. I've got a long memory. Let's list a few of them, shall we? Computers will make your work easier. Computers will cut down on the amount of paper. Indeed, we will have paperless offices. You'll be able to work shorter hours. That's a good one. And you'll be able to retire earlier, and you'll be able to earn more money. Oh, what a sick joke that's turned out to be, hasn't it? While we're on the subject of computers, have you noticed these days that they're appearing even in doctors' surgeries when you come to have your appointment? You're not faced with a nice young lady, a nice human interface anymore. You're faced with this anonymous screen on the wall. Now, the medical profession, you'd expect better, because they know about bugs and bacteria and all these sort of things. But what have you got? You've got a screen there, which every man and his dog who comes into that surgery carrying goodness knows what in the way of viruses have to poke and prod at. And you've got to do the same. What a perfect medium for transferring diseases about. But these are things that put your blood pressure up. It's so obvious. And while we're on the subject of visiting the doctors, the other day my wife and myself went in for a general health check, medical. Even that's a hazardous experience when it's with the wife anyway. Because the doctor was asking us, you know, various health questions. Do we feel for lumps and things like this? And he asked the wife if she felt for breast lumps. And just to be helpful and speed things along a bit, I just said, oh yeah, no problem there, I check every day. I've still got the bruise on my shin. The banking profession, that wonderful group of people who spend their entire day dreaming up how many more millions they can con us out of. They're real experts at it. I have here a list, a little quiz for you, see if you get it right. Who is the odd man out? Lord Stevenson, former chairman of the Halifax Bank of Scotland, HBOS. Sir Fred Goodwin, former chief executive of the Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS. Alan Hornby, former chief executive of HBOS. Sir Tom McKillop, former chairman of RBS. John McFall MP, former chairman of the Treasury Select Committee. Alistair Darling, bless him, Chancellor of the Exchequer. Gordon Brown, Chancellor of the Exchequer and very briefly Prime Minister. And finally Sir Terry Wogan, former presenter of Radio 2's Breakfast Show. The odd one out, you may well say, is Terry Wogan. And you'd be quite correct, but for the wrong reason. Because out of that little group, Terry Wogan is the only one who has formal banking qualifications. No wonder we're in the financial crap. Ah yes, supermarkets, those wonderful organisations along with the banks who make you think they're all doing you a favour when actually they're ripping you off left, right and centre. Yes, my blood pressure was put up the other day, just simply doing a bit of shopping. I was in the queue and there was a lady at the front being served by the cashier, which is unusual these days. You can actually get a cashier to serve you, but anyway. The lady was advised by the cashier to bring her own bags next time, because using the plastic bags is bad for the environment. And the lady apologised and said that she'd do that next time and that she didn't have the green thing back in her day. But the cashier, now on a roll, very haughtily replied, "That's the problem. Your generation didn't care enough for the environment for the future generations." She was right. We didn't have the green thing back in our day. We didn't need it. Because back then things like bottles, milk bottles, beer bottles, pop bottles, they got returned to the suppliers. They were washed and reused. Recycled is what they were. We filled up ink pens. We didn't throw them away and replace them with a new one. We did the same with razors. We replaced the razor blades, not chucked the whole thing away. We didn't need the green thing. Thinking about it, we also walked. We walked upstairs in the shops, we walked upstairs in the office. We didn't have power consuming, carbon footprint creating escalators and things like this. And if we went down the road to the shops, we walked. We didn't go down there in a 300 horsepower car. And back then, we washed children's nappies because we didn't have the throwaway kind. And our clothes were dried on a line, not in machines gobbling hundreds of amps. Wind and solar energy really did dry our clothes in those days. And children had hand-me-down clothes, not new ones bought every time. Back then, we had one TV or one radio in the house, and the really well off had one TV and one radio. We had small screens, about the size of a handkerchief, remember them? Not a screen the size of the county of Yorkshire. In the kitchen, we used our hands to blend and stir because we didn't have electric machines to do that for us. And when we sent things by post, we used old newspapers for packaging, not plastic foam or bubble wrap. We didn't need the green thing back then. When we cut the lawn, we didn't use a petrol mower burning up fuel and carbon. We used a manual mower. We pushed it. We exercised by working and walking, not using electricity on a treadmill in a health club. Back then we drank water out of a tap. We didn't expect it to be flown thousands of miles around the world in a plastic bottle. And we actually had fresh seasonal food, which we prepared ourselves. It didn't come in a tin or a plastic container or anything else like that, or frozen. Yes, back then people walked or rode a bike to work. Pupils walked to school. They didn't turn their mums into a 24-hour taxi service. We also only had one electrical outlet per room, not a bank of outlets powering dozens of computerised gadgets which communicated to satellites 2,000 miles in space just to tell you where the nearest pizza joint was. So isn't it sad how the younger generation blame us for the state of the world today? So, if you know someone who's an old person like me, who wants a lesson from a smart-ass young person in how we got it all wrong, please forward the video on. Remember, don't make old people mad. We don't like being old in the first place, so it don't take much to piss us off.